everyone, and welcome to day 8 of the 12 Days of Chocolatey. I'm your host, Adil Lagari, and at Chocolatey, we are the Windows automation experts. So just a heads up for those of us joining us today for the webinar, the 12 Days of Chocolatey is a 12-day event that we're putting on the Chocolatey team here, where for an hour every day, we regale you with some chocolatey goodness. So that includes some talks, some webinars, discussions, and Q&A, new feature announcements, and most importantly as well, if you pay attention, the opportunity to win some prizes every day. So feel free to go check out our YouTube and Twitch channels for the other days, or join us live at 8 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, to watch some of those other sessions in this series. Today, we're going to be doing a webinar, which is over on Zoom instead of the regular channels. So hopefully you're over here, and you are if you've joined here. So awesome. Thank you for joining us. And today we're going to be showing you how to accelerate your Windows automation journey with Ansible and Chocolatey. So just to go over a little bit of an agenda up front, just so you know what you're getting yourself into today, we'll start with introductions from our team here, and then we'll cover why Chocolatey and Ansible together make such a great combination for Windows software automation. We'll highlight the benefits of these platforms and some of the proposed architectural best practices as well. Then we'll get into the technical meat of this talk in the form of 5 use cases to help tell the story of ways to take advantage of this tooling. And then we'll give you some links to dive deeper for yourselves, followed by a conclusion and Q&A. So let's get these formalities out of the way with introductions. Paul and George, over to you.
Thanks, Adil. My name is Paul Broadwith, and I'm a senior technical engineer working with Chocolatey Software. I've got 25 to 30 years in IT now in various different sectors. You can see there on the screen, including the nuclear sector and defence. I'm also the lead engineer on Boxstart on the C-Choco DSC resource, and I'm an MCT in cloud and data center management MVP. George.
Good morning, George James, Solution Architect at Red Hat, and I specialize in network and Windows automation with Ansible.
Okay, we're going to start with a little introduction into Chocolatey. So we're kind of halfway-ish through, maybe later halfway through the 12 days of Chocolatey. So if you haven't been with us last week and you're not with us earlier on this week, then you may be new to Chocolatey. So as I said, we're going to go over that. We're going to go over some Ansible as well. So just to kick off with Chocolatey, Chocolatey is a complete software management system for Windows that provides you total control over your software lifecycle. So what does that actually mean? Well, Chocolatey uses the NuGet packaging format and extends it to work with zip scripts, installers, binaries, registry keys, license keys, anything really you can put into a package format. And there's been some, let's say, debate this week about whether the package name is a new package or whether it's a nupkeg. I'm going to sort of completely sit on the fence and say informally, I call it a nupkeg, and formally I pronounce it new package. So I've said my bit, let's move on to the next one. Chocolatey packages contain PowerShell scripts as well, so they allow you to install, upgrade, and uninstall the package. And these PowerShell scripts contain instructions on how to manage those packages. So for example, if you're upgrading an application, you could stop the service, upgrade the software, and then start that service again as well. Chocolatey packages are write once and deploy many. So once you've created that, you can expect the package to be installed if it's not already there. If it is already there, Chocolatey won't do that for you because, you know, it doesn't repeat itself in that sense. Chocolatey is a pipeline-friendly command line tool as well that you can provide parameters to, so it makes it easy to use in an automated way. And Chocolatey also supports all the Windows versions that are supported by Microsoft. So all the way back to Windows Server 2008 R2 in Azure. It's important to say in Azure because Microsoft are still supporting that. We also support back to Windows PowerShell version 2. And finally, that last point there is really important when you're in an organization. The Chocolatey community repository is over 8,000 packages and over 100,000 versions of those packages. So as an organization, you can utilize those packages and save yourself reinventing that wheel by internalizing them to your own private repository. We'll talk a little more about what internalization is and your private repository a little later on. So the next logical question, we now know what Chocolatey is, but why Chocolatey? Why am I asking you to care about it? And let's talk about why Chocolatey can be a useful tool in your sysadmin toolkit as well. So application packaging, it's on Windows, it's non-standard and it's almost by design. And partly it's due to the many iterations of Windows operating system over time, making that focus very much on GUI first. So EXEs, MSIs, MSIXs and Windows Store apps, all of them are focused on being pretty and a clicky way to install that software. So it's a kind of click-first approach, but that doesn't really scale well in an organizational context. So a standard approach to packaging is really important. If you have a quick, robust, and a reliable way to create packages, it's going to make your install, upgrade, and uninstall process seamless and really easy to maintain. And that leads right on to the next reason as well. If it isn't easy to update and patch your applications, let's be honest, it's not going to get done. Us sysadmins, and I do include myself in that, as I am from an operations and a sysadmin background, we've got an ever-growing to-do list, and it kind of feels like we're always being asked to do more things without any additional resources. And so ensuring the applications installed on our servers and on our workstations have the latest updated version, that's not an easy task, and it slips slower and lower down on that to-do list. So this lack of updates as well, if you're not patching your software, that leads to vulnerable software. It leads to vulnerable systems, and it leads to security risks in your organization. Everything that we want to avoid. So the last point here is key. DevOps and automation pipelines are not just the future. We're not talking about the 25th century here, where one sysadmin boldly went. They're already here, and they're here to stay. And the only way to do more with less is to adopt that DevOps and automation mindset. And that's where a pipeline-friendly tool like Chocolatey really shines. George, do you want to talk about why Ansible?
Yes, thanks, Paul. So why Ansible? So put simply, the Red Hat Ansible automation platform allows you to easily and seamlessly manage and automate across hybrid environments. So to accomplish this, we have three core concepts. The first is simple, and by this we mean accessible. So before coming to Red Hat, I was a network engineer for many years, and like many in that field, I was comfortable with the command line, but I wasn't a developer. So when I originally looked at automation, I knew I needed something that was easy to learn and accessible to anyone on my team, and Ansible filled that need. So simple also means human readable, so that anyone that can understand the technology that they're trying to automate should have no issues learning how to use Ansible to do what they need to do. I like to say it's manager readable, so a manager can come look over my shoulder and understand what I'm having to accomplish in Ansible. So if you've ever been in a design review meeting and having to explain a config, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But this also means there's no special coding skills required to start using Ansible today. But simple does not mean it isn't powerful. Under that human readable format, we have Python and PowerShell. Python is used for most environments, and PowerShell is used for automating Windows. And finally, we have agentless. And Ansible does not install any additional software on the systems it automates. Ansible uses WinRM to connect to Windows hosts, which means you can start automating today. So Paul, back to you for the next slide.
Thanks, George. What I was going to say before we go on, if you've got any questions today at all, if you put them in the Q&A section, you'll see that down at the bottom of the window. And what that does is it allows the team to either pick those questions up and answer them directly, or they can pass them to us to answer live on air. So don't use the chat for that, because your questions will get lost. Use the Q&A button at the bottom. But yeah, thank you, George. What I want to talk about now is we've talked about Chocolatey. We've talked about Ansible. Let's talk about why Chocolatey and Ansible together make such a dynamic duo of DevOps. And yes, I did just make that up. So we here at Chocolatey have partnered with the Red Hat Ansible team to create a certified Ansible content collection called, there's no prize for guessing, it's chocolatey.chocolatey. But it's available on Ansible Galaxy for those of you using Ansible open source. And for those using Automation Hub, it's there too, and it's backed by our joint support team. And this collection allows you to declaratively define your Chocolatey configuration, your features, your sources, your package state. So you don't have to use any Chocolatey commands. You can simply write the domain-specific language of your Ansible playbooks and let Ansible just make it so, to use that Star Trek again. One of the biggest benefits of a configuration manager like Ansible is that you maintain an idempotent state. So if you want to repeatedly apply a set of playbooks, you can do so, knowing that there is no change that's going to be made to those endpoints unless it's actually needed. And lastly, as a Red Hat automation platform customer, you're going to have the power of Ansible Tower in your hands, which will give you a web dashboard, an API to be able to manage scheduling, maintenance windows, credentials, and other access for team members like junior admins. So let's talk a little bit about the Chocolatey for Business package flow. While Chocolatey free and open source is a more hands-on and DIY approach to packaging, Chocolatey for Business makes it easy with a GUI to create packages using Package Builder and upload those packages using Package Uploader. So if you can see in the top left-hand corner there, we've got the Chocolatey Community Repository. And just below that, we've got the admin workstation and the automation pipeline. We're going to just concentrate on those three a little bit to begin with. So the admin workstation is where you would generally sit as a sysadmin, and you could use Package Builder to right-click on an executable or an MSI and actually create a package from that installer in 5 to 10 seconds, all depending on how long it takes to maybe download the installer, etc. But once you've done that, you've created that package in that GUI, you can then upload it through another GUI to your internal repository server. You can see sitting in the middle of the screen there. The package internalizer is really important and really great tool for organizations. What that can actually do is stop you reinventing that wheel that I talked about a couple of slides ago. So what you can do, and using Google Chrome as an example, you can take the Google Chrome package that's part of the Chocolatey Community Repository, and you can bring that down. And within that, there's instructions on how to install and manage the Google software. But part of those instructions is to download the Google installer for somewhere inside Google's infrastructure. So what Package Internalizer will do is it will bring down all the resources for a package, in this case, the Google installer, bring it down and put it inside that package. And therefore, that package has now got everything in it that it needs to be able to manage that software. So it saves you reaching out to the internet within an organization. Let's say you're installing it 1,000 times. It'll reach out and download that Google Chrome installer 1,000 times. If you've got it internal into that package, it doesn't reach out anymore. So that package can also be taken, and it can be taken to offline networks. See, you've got a secure network or a network that's perhaps not part of this internal network that we see on the screen here. You can take that package, move it, and be able to install it onto those machines as well, because it's all self-contained. Now, Package Internalizer is also great for, let's say, for example, the update Google Chrome, and you can automate that update process, pushing that to your internal repository server. So Package Internalizer will be able to do that as well, push that through the automation pipeline they have there. We've just highlighted Jenkins and TeamCity, but it could be other products. And then once that's been internalized, push that to your repository server. And then right next to that, we've got how do you deploy that to your nodes? Well, we're talking about Ansible today, and Ansible will be able to do that configuration management and deployment for you straight through to the endpoints. We're going to look at later on. George is going to show us how we would do that with Ansible. And right at the bottom there, as part of Chocolatey for Business, we've got Chocolatey Central Management. It gives you that package reporting. So, for example, you can see the outdated packages that are on your endpoints and perhaps remediate and patch them, as quickly as possible. But just to cover, just before we finish this particular slide, the repository server, the automation pipeline, and that admin workstation, we've got a quick deployment environment. Chocolatey's quick deployment environment kind of replaces that within one virtual machine. So rather than perhaps having that on separate machines, you can use a quick deployment environment to get you up and running really quickly and be able to get that working through Ansible and deploying onto your endpoints. So we're actually just going to look at some use cases now. We have 5 use cases today. And I think, George, you're going to share your screen for us, and we'll go forward on to the first one.
All right, awesome.
While we're doing that, just to remind everybody, again, the Q&A for the questions. If you've got any questions, put them into Q&A and not into the chat. The team will answer them or pass them to us to answer live on air.
All right.
Awesome. So our first use case. So enforcing the use of a private internal repository. This is quite important, and this is why we start with this. So just to kind of read over it, Natasha has followed organizational best practice for the public Chocolatey community repository and is configuring an internal repository to store packages. She needs to update all those Windows hosts, though, with that private internal repository to let them know where it is, so to use it. And she wants to also disable the public repository, stop the Windows endpoints from doing that. And finally, she wants to verify that change. She wants to get some output to say, hey, that's actually been done. So, George, how would we go about doing that in Ansible Tower?
So the first thing we would do is Natasha would write a Ansible playbook that would use the Win Chocolatey source module to remove the public source and add the internal source. She can then deploy that in Ansible Tower, and we can use Win Chocolatey facts to verify that change. So first, let's go take a look at the actual playbook. And here we have a Chocolatey Win Chocolatey source module. And we're saying that the default Chocolatey source is absent. So we're removing it. And we're going to add our new internal source. So we're going to call it Chocolatey internal. It's going to be present. And here's the URL for the source. And then finally, we're going to use the Win Chocolatey facts module to display the sources from each host. So with that, let's pop over to Ansible Tower, and we'll look at use case 1. Now, this is a simple job template that I've already set up, and it's going to use my project, which is the Chocolatey webinar, and our enforced private repo playbook that we just looked at. I'll go ahead and launch the playbook. It's just making a couple changes, so it goes pretty fast. And now it's doing that final step of gathering those facts so I can verify the change. And I have 2 sources now. The public one is gone. I have a licensed repository, and then I have the one that we just added.
At the bottom of that log we're seeing there, George, we're saying OK for change 2. Could you explain what the differences are between them?
So OK means that nothing was changed. It verified that whatever state we wanted our host to be in, it was in fact in that state. So when it's gathering facts, it just reports that as OK, nothing changed. And the same with displaying the configured Chocolatey sources. But our 2 tasks that we made the change, those show up as changed. So it's telling us, yes, I in fact made that change. And you can click on here to see the details.
Awesome.
Change true. And then at the end, just gives you a recap. OK, all 4 OK, and 2 of them were changed.
Awesome. So the 4, the OK, the facts hasn't really changed anything. So that's why there's only 2 changed and not 4.
Correct. Yes. It just reports it back as it completed successfully, but nothing was actually changed on your host.
Okay. Awesome. That was really quick as well. Really simple. That was only a few lines of code just to get that done.
Correct. Yep. And I mean, here I'm only going against 1 host, but it wouldn't be any different if you're going, against 100 or more. All right. We can go on to the next use case.
So use case 2, this is what I mentioned earlier on about deploying application packages with Ansible. If you remember the infrastructure layout that I showed you when I was talking about just a couple of slides ago. So we've got here about Bob. Bob needs to deploy a trusted copy of the latest 7-zip to 1,000 workstations. As George said, just in the last use case, it wouldn't make any difference whether it's 1 workstation or 1,000. It's the same playbook that you would run. So what we're actually meaning here as well is just to explain what a trusted copy of the latest 7-zip. That trusted could be that it just comes from your internal repository. That could be okay for your organization. And that might just be enough of a feel good for your organization that that's actually been done. That's the standard that's there. Or we could be talking about a trusted copy, might be something that you've actually gone through. You might have a security team, for example, and you might want to send 7-zip to them. They would run it through a set of tests and make sure that they're happy with 7-zip. It might be to see things like buffer overflows in the code and all these other kind of things that a security team would do. So take that part of trusted copy to mean something specific to your organization. Okay. But anyway, Bob needs to deploy that trusted copy to the latest 7-zip to 1,000 workstations. And it's important that that's done after 11 p.m. tonight because that's Bob's maintenance window. That's when he's allowed to do work to workstations without there being any issues. So, George, just handing over to you, you're going to show us how we would do that within Ansible Tower as well.
Correct. So first, let's take a look at the playbook. And this is it. So I variabilized the package name. So I'm going to call it Choco Packages. That's our variable. And then later on in Tower, I'll pass 7-zip as that variable. So then when Chocolatey will loop through our variable, which will be 7-zip, and install that package for us. So this is it for the playbook. And in Ansible Tower, we'll go look at use case 2. So I've already created the job template here. And you can see down here, I've created an extra variable called 7-zip that's going to get assigned to this Choco Packages variable. That's the same as over here. So it's going to get passed into the loop and deploy that app for us, for that application. So let's go ahead and hit launch.
That's what you call a Jinja template variable, right, George?
Yes. Yeah, technically that's what it is.
That makes it nice and reusable, that playbook. Very cool.
Correct. Yeah, and now remember we're pulling it down from our internal source that we just configured. All right. So, okay, change 1. Now we have 1 task, so there's only 1 changed. Item 7-zip, change true. It gives you some other data in here, but that's basically it.
Awesome. So if Bob has run this job, he can run this ad hoc when he needs to. But how would he schedule it for that maintenance window, Josh?
So let's go back to the job template. And anytime you're in a job template, you have a schedules. Now that I'm in schedules, I'll go ahead and add a new schedule. And 7-zip after dark. So our start date, we have an approved change to deploy this application tonight at 11 o'clock. So I'm going to put in, there we go, 12 o'clock, and my local time zone. And I'm not going to repeat. It's only going to happen one time. And I'm going to save the schedule. Now this job will run at 11 o'clock at night. So Bob can go home, have dinner with his family, go to sleep, wake up, and the job is done.
That's giving you a bit more of a work-life balance as well. You don't have to be about at 11 p.m. at night in order to run that particular job. You can let Ansible Tower just do all that legwork for you.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So Bob has just installed 7-zip through that playbook. What if he actually wanted to install more packages than 7-zip? Could he just add additional names of the packages into that playbook like we did for 7-zip?
Yeah. So right here, we can go right here. So those package names are passed through variables here. So if he wanted to add more, he could just come in here and add in additional variables.
Okay, fantastic. So you could just have a big list of Chocolatey packages there that you could install.
Yeah, or if you had like a new developer package that needed to be installed, hey, I need to install these 5 packages out to all my developer teams on these 50 workstations. You could have that pre-approved list, come in here, create your list, launch it, push it out to all your workstations.
Awesome. Okay. Fantastic. So I think that's Bob happy. We can move back on to our next use case. So use case 3, allowing the help desk to install certain packages. So we've seen there, Bob is a member of the IT team. Maybe he's a senior member of the IT team. So he was deploying those packages to those 1,000 workstations. But what we want to do is maybe allow the help desk to install certain software applications or certain packages to workstations, so that they don't have to keep going to, your tier 4 support. They don't have to go to senior members of the team, because it's certainly something that help desk could do. So Rebecca's been tasked with doing that. So Rebecca's been tasked with giving Beth, specifically a help desk admin, the ability to install just certain packages. And those packages are 7-zip, Git, Node.js, and Python onto those Windows endpoints. But as we talked about, Rebecca would like to limit Beth to be only able to install those particular packages. So again, George, that's very similar to our last one, but we're going to do something a little different for this particular use case. Can you show us how we're going to work with Ansible Tower to achieve that for Rebecca?
Sure. So like Paul said, we're going to reuse the same playbook that's already created. So now Rebecca doesn't have to go and write a new playbook. She can use something that's already exists. So I'm going to log out as my admin user and log in as Rebecca. Now she's part of an organization called the Windows Organization, and she's a systems administrator in this organization. So she can come in here and create job templates and do whatever she needs to do. So she's going to create a new job template that's going to allow the help desk to install a list of applications. So she's going to reuse that same install packages playbook, and she's going to create a survey. And in that survey, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a survey that the help desk can then answer the questions of what packages they would like installed. So what packages would you like to install? And we'll say pick one or more. Now the variable name, excuse me, has to be the same from here, because that's the variable we're going to pass in. Our answer type is going to be multiple select. So we could put in 7-zip, Git, Node.js, and let's say Python. We're going to add that survey question and save our job template. Now under permissions, she's going to give Beth the execute permission to this playbook. So when Beth comes, and Beth is part of the help desk, so she's going to log in. Now, Beth has a very different view in Ansible Tower because she doesn't have a lot of rights in here. So she's kind of new. She's only been on the job for a little bit, so we don't want to give her too many rights. So she can only see this one playbook for right now. She can come in here and she can look and see what the playbook is configured for, but she can't change anything. So when she launches the playbook, it's going to ask her, what packages would you like to install? Pick one or more. So we already know 7-zip's installed, but let's say we want to do Git and Node.js. But she doesn't want to do Python today, so she'll leave that one off. And then she hits next. And you can see it builds that variable list for us. It just gives you a preview of what it's going to be passing. And you hit launch. Hopefully this doesn't take too long. So 7-zip's already installed, so it says okay. Paul mentioned idempotency earlier, so it's not going to keep installing the same thing twice. It looks like I had Git already installed.
So, George, I think that's a good point to make. And just to reiterate again, when you're installing those packages, you're only installing the ones that are not there already. So one machine might take 10 minutes to install all the packages. One machine might not install anything. So the playbook's just going to go and look, yep, they're all installed there and finish. And then another one might just install one of them. So it's good to know that, it's not 10 minutes or an hour or 3 hours, depending on the packages, that's installing and taking up that time on every single machine.
Yeah. Another thing to note is, I'm only running it against one Windows host here, but, you could set this job up to go against 5 machines or 10 machines or whatever you need to at one time. So you can see here it installed Node.js for us. It changed one. It says one task is okay, but within that task, we had 2 packages that were okay, that were not needed to be reinstalled.
Could we have a look, just going back to that, George, see what it says changed? I notice you can click on it and get much more information.
Yep.
So it's not just, that log that we see all the time. It's not just that. There are bits you can get more detailed information about. Okay, that could be really useful for troubleshooting. See that last package, rather than installing, actually failed. We'd be able to get some information out of there about perhaps why that install actually failed.
Yeah, and then you could have another admin go in and look at it.
Yeah. Yeah,
this is really cool, guys.
Yeah, I was going to say it could be something really simple that from that you can go, well, if I just rerun it, that's it, it'll install properly. Or as you said, you can actually maybe pass that up the support chain and get somebody to look at the machine. Perhaps there's something wrong in the machine or whatever that you would need somebody else. So that's a good first steps to be able to check that installation. That's awesome.
So yeah, just further to what Paul was saying, this is actually one of my favorite features with Tower. Is the ability to have this dashboard, being able to have an interactive survey to give not only the role-based access control piece where you're controlling the access to that individual playbook to a certain team, but also that nice little web UI that you get when you pop up and you give users the choice to install different packages. I really like that integration built into Tower. So that's really cool. Thanks for showing that off, George.
Yep.
The surveys are one of my favorite things as well about Tower. So you can give that, we've got Beth here who's a help desk and we're limiting the access, but it could be something as simple as, it's still a senior admin, but you don't want to have to keep going in and maybe adding those variables in for the Choco packages every time. You just want that survey to pop up. You just type the name and hit launch and off it goes. Just makes things so much easier.
Yeah, it's also awesome if you have like a NOC or another support team that maybe needs access to a certain workstation or a certain device, and you can give them access without having to give them all the credentials into that device.
Yeah, that's true, because Ansible has its own credentials. It has its own way of getting onto that machine. So yeah, people don't need those permissions to get onto the device itself. They can just run that playbook to do whatever they need to do. And because the playbook, it's written down, it's in code, you know exactly what it's going to do. Not giving people access to a Windows host, or in this case, all those Windows hosts, that playbook is doing those 1 or 2 things because it's written down there. They're not then going in and be able to do other things as well. I really like that.
All right, let's go to the use case 4.
Number 4, yes. So Chocolatey has Chocolatey features. So if anybody has been using Chocolatey for any length of time, you will probably have enabled and disabled Chocolatey features to be able to customize it either on your own machine, or if you're an organization and you're managing other machines, you will certainly have done it through your fleet of machines as well. But we've got Francisco here. He is another IT team member, and he needs to allow 1,000 of his desktop users to install packages themselves. So this is what we call self-service. So he wants to deploy Chocolatey Agent and Chocolatey GUI and also enable that self-service feature. And once he's completed that, he wants to verify the change. Now, if you're interested in the self-service feature, we actually have another day on the 12 Days of Chocolatey on Monday coming, and it'll be myself that's actually going through the self-service. But yeah, so George, again, back to Ansible Tower, how are we going to do this with the features? We installed packages, we've changed sources. How do we actually change features with Ansible Tower?
So Francisco can use the WinChocolatey, which we've looked at, to install the agent and the GUI. But then you can also use the WinChocolatey feature module to enable the self-service features. And then we're going to use WinChocolatey facts to verify that those have been completed. So we'll go ahead and look at the playbook. Now I've pre-populated my playbook with some variables. I could do this in Tower. I just chose to do it here for the sake of the demonstration. And so we have our tasks here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to install our Choco packages, which are our two Chocolatey packages, Chocolatey Agent and Chocolatey GUI. Then we're going to configure our features with WinChocolatey feature. And these are our three features. And then after that, we're going to retrieve our facts and then display them. And then, Paul, could you just talk about these three features real quick before I show Ansible Tower?
Sure. Yeah. Use background service. That's normally admin permissions are required to install and uninstall software on Windows. So use background service. The background service is part of Chocolatey for Business. And what it does is it allows non-administrator users to be able to manage software on the machines or manage packages on the machines. To use background service with non-administrators only is kind of self-explanatory. It means only use the background service with non-administrators. So you've maybe got somebody in finance, let's say, they're not a member of the IT team, so they've got limited access or limited permissions onto their machine. They don't have admin permissions to be able to install and uninstall those packages. So only use the background service with non-administrators. And the final one there is quite important as well. What that does is, let's say that as an IT team, you've given Joe a new laptop and you've installed certain packages on that laptop that as an organization you need. Let's say you need Google Chrome on there. We're using that example again. We're using Google Chrome. That laptop must have Google Chrome on there because it's needed for an internal business application. Now, if you don't have this feature enabled, what happens is that Joe will then be able to go in and uninstall that using the background service that we've configured there. So he'll be able to take Chrome off. That may start raising help desk questions because Joe maybe doesn't know he needs Google Chrome for that particular application. He thinks maybe you just need a browser. So that what that does is it allows you background installs, uninstalls only for the packages that user has installed. So for example, again, browsers, Joe might go, I love Firefox. I'm going to install Firefox. So that's great. And then Joe starts to use Google Chrome, goes, I don't really like Firefox. He can uninstall Firefox, but he can't uninstall Google Chrome because you've turned this particular feature on. So again, we'll go over them on Monday as part of the self-service day for the 12 Days of Chocolatey. But that's a brief overview of what they're used for.
Cool. So now let's look how to deploy that in Tower. So I'm still logged in as Beth, so I need to log in as Francisco here. Now, Francisco is a administrator in our Windows organization, so he's allowed to create new job templates. So he's created this one here. And it's using the managed Chocolatey features playbook that he created. So we'll hit launch. So we'll take a second to install these two packages.
So George, I'm just going to take this opportunity to answer one of the questions in chat. Actually, not one of the questions.
Perfect.
One of the great people from our joint teams, Josh Robinette, is doing a great job of answering a lot of those questions in the Q&A as well. So we appreciate it. But he did bring up an important point, which is WinChocolatey facts. So those facts that you're collecting are what you can use to actually drive other tasks in your playbook as well, right? That's very useful if you're trying to capture information and you're trying to pass that to the next command, like trying to see what packages are out of date and maybe using that to drive an update for those packages.
Correct. Yeah, so you can do WinChocolatey facts at the start of your playbook. Playbooks are all processed in order, so you would do that first. And then based on some fact inside there, you would have some logic that said run this task or don't, or run this version or upgrade or don't.
Awesome.
But yeah, once you've retrieved something with facts, you can parse out any of the data in there and use that for logic for other tasks.
Mm-hmm. And I've seen this question a few times, just referring to SSH and WinRM. The multiple ways you can use to connect is an important one. With Ansible, currently, you leverage WinRM with PowerShell in the backend as well, and SSH is also a connection. So I'm assuming you're doing SSH here. That's why we're seeing the SSH, George, just to highlight that. Or
no,
are you using WinRM?
It's WinRM.
Oh, you are using. Okay. Yeah. You can also set WinRM to go over HTTPS as well. So
Yeah, I have basic authenticate. Excuse me, I have basic authentication set up today, but you can encrypt that if you need to.
Yes, it's a demo environment. We get it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But
So
you can get elaborate with Cred SSP and Kerberos and all that stuff.
no, yeah, we didn't need to do that today. So, but no, I am running against a real Windows VM, so it's not just going off and pretending.
Just to follow on from that, actually, Adil, I think that's a kind of legacy thing from Ansible. It always has that SSH password at the top. It might be something.
Oh, yes.
But you can actually use OpenSSH with Windows hosts through Ansible. There are some limitations, and it's not a limitation of Ansible, it's a limitation of the SSH implementation on Windows. But there is a page in the Ansible docs about that. So you can use SSH with Windows hosts, yeah. But today we're using WinRM, and WinRM seems to give the least amount of issues at the moment. But that SSH support will probably keep growing and getting better and better.
For sure. And I think to call out one of the folks from the Ansible team, Jordan Borean, has been doing a lot of work on that end with SSH, but not only that, but the Become stuff. So if you ever get a chance to check out one of his talks on Become, really neat stuff.
I think he actually wrote the document I'm talking about, and that is one of the limitations is around Become for Windows through SSH. But yeah, awesome.
Cool. So yeah, so you can see the Chocolatey facts returned some things here. Now we could, then parse this out and put those variables into reports or into other systems, whatever we needed to do. Here we're just displaying it for the sake of the demo. And as a list of the packages that Chocolatey's installed on the system. And there you go, all done. Let's move on to the next use case.
I think throughout all of this, George, what's really coming across is this is very simple and straightforward. You're doing all of this work with only a few lines of code.
Correct.
Yeah, we're not writing hundreds of lines here and having to scroll through them and explain it. It's a half dozen lines of code, and off we go. We've got all this stuff working. So we're on to our final use case for today, and we've done sources, we've done packages, we've done features, and now we're doing the Chocolatey config. So the problem here is after becoming a Chocolatey for Business customer, Mukesh wants to ensure that all of the Windows hosts have their Chocolatey cache location set following organizational best practice. So there's a couple of things we recommend organizations do with the Chocolatey config when they're installing Chocolatey, and the cache location is one of them. So I'm expecting, George, this to be another couple of lines of code in Ansible because it makes everything so simple and so easy to do. So, but can you show us again how we would do this in Ansible Tower?
Sure. So we're going to set the cache location. And that's it. We're saying the WinChocolatey config, the cache location is going to be present, and it's going to have this value. And that's it. All right. So let's go over to Tower, and I'll just stay logged in as Francisco for now. He's an admin, so he can run it for Mukesh. So set cache location.
They're friends, so it should be
fun. Yeah, they're friends. And you can launch these from here with the rocket ship. I've been going in and looking at the job template each time, but we can just launch it from here.
And I like next to the actual, when you're launching it, the little green squares show that it's been successful all those times.
Yep. Yeah. And sometimes a playbook will fail for a reason that has nothing to do with the availability of your Windows host, or it's just, it could be something simple. So you'll see a red square in there when it fails. So that's it. It's only making a change to the config, so it's very fast. And that's it. We're done with the use cases.
So just real quick before you move over from the root use cases, George, if I could, just tying some of the questions in that we're getting from the Q&A into our talk and some of these demos. So if you flip back to your playbook for a sec, one of the quick things I want to highlight with Ansible playbooks, so this is your standard YAML playbook, but the definition right up top of hosts. So someone asked the question in the chat generally about what are you targeting with these different machines? Specifically, what I wanted to highlight here was that hosts Windows is in your inventory as a group of Windows hosts. So you can define that to be any sets of servers or workstations you want, or you can target individual names of hosts that you have in your inventory, correct?
Yep. So my host here is Windows. So in Ansible Tower, I have an inventory, and my Windows hosts inventory has a group called Windows, and that's the group that it's targeting. And that has a single host in it right now, but I could have multiple hosts in here. And then
you could get as elaborate as you want with this by having multiple nested hosts in different groups and stuff too.
Correct. Yes, you can.
Very cool.
And now in my use case, when I set up my job template, I have an inventory of Windows hosts, which is that inventory that I just showed you.
Awesome. And I see the checkboxes there specifically in this UI, I want to highlight for the prompt on launch. So you can also have it be able to define on when a user runs that individual job template, right? To ask them which one they want to run on. So it can make it kind of useful if you're handing it to somebody that maybe doesn't know Tower that well or Ansible. You can just give them the option to pick, which or to input whichever specific host they want to run it on.
Yeah, back to our best, example, you could give her rights to certain groups of hosts, and then as part of launching the playbook, she can pick which one she wants to run it against.
That's awesome. Cool. Thanks for that. All right. I think we can transition over.
Okay.
To
stop share.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. And I'll hop back over and share my screen now. Okay. So thanks so much for all those demos and telling that story for us, George and Paul. So I'm just going to summarize some of those use cases we talked about for everyone's benefit and to show you all I've actually been paying attention. In the beginning with use case 1, we actually talked about enforcing that private repository, and we used the WinChocolatey source module for that. Then we installed a specific package with WinChocolatey. That's probably the simplest example there, but also we then use that same playbook in use case 3 to control access to install specific packages. So we took some of the RBAC that's built in, the role-based access control built into Tower, and we used WinChocolatey, and we created a job template with a survey to give a list of packages to a specific user. I believe that was Beth that Rebecca was giving access to. And then we used the WinChocolatey feature in the next use case to enable self-service with the Chocolatey GUI, some of those additional Chocolatey for Business features we have there, specifically to allow your users to install packages without requiring admin rights on top of it. And the last use case there, we configured a cache location using the WinChocolatey config as per the best practices from Chocolatey. In addition to that, of course, as we called out before, the WinChocolatey facts are very useful because we can use those not only to capture information and to report on different pieces of our playbooks and tasks that run, but in addition to that, we can use that to drive the next step in our task or playbook as well. So we can capture some information, actually take that data and use it to run the next step, like what's out of date, okay, go and update it, sort of thing. So very cool there. So hope you guys got some value out of those use cases and telling that story and see how you can sort of apply this or implement this in your environment as well. So we've included some links here for further exploration. I'll talk through them and give you a chance to write them down, and we'll throw them into the chat maybe even as well if we want to. But these links are pretty easy to get to if you want. The code from today's talk specifically will be going on ch0.co/12dayscode. So the 12 days of Chocolatey, we've had a code repo up, and we're going to include some of the playbooks that George will kindly share with us there over into that code repository. So you can check that out and the other day's code as well. The Ansible collection, chocolatey.chocolatey, of course, is available on Ansible Galaxy as well as on the Red Hat Automation Hub if you are an Ansible customer on that end. That's backed with our support team as well, so it's great. And so you can get to that GitHub repo just to take a look at the different modules that are in there and some of the README at ch0.co/Ansible collection. So that's maintained by ourselves as well as the Ansible team together. The 12 days of Chocolatey link, of course, is ch0.co/12 days. So you can check out our other days in the events there. Speaking of which, here's our schedule of what's been done so far and what's coming soon in these future 12 days of Chocolatey sessions. So please tune in if you can, live at 8 a.m. Pacific or noon Eastern, or you can watch back in video on demand later. So thank you all for joining. Hope you have an enjoyable rest of your day. Paul, George?
Yeah, thank you guys. Really enjoyed it today. Sorry, George.
Take care, everyone.